I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, cold wind brushing the back of my neck, hands gripping the folded paper someone had left on a flat rock near the woods. The black ink had bled slightly from the morning dew. The handwriting was messy, but clear enough for every line to feel like a claw scraping my chest. Let's see if she can survive a little wilderness adventure. Below it, Madison's star-shaped bracelet lay on the grass, glinting silver. She knew. They all knew. They left me. If you've ever had to choose between your dignity and your family, leave a comment, hit like, share this story, and follow the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. I'm Genevieve, 32, a lab assistant at a public high school in Flagstaff, Arizona. The only child from my mother's previous marriage, I used to think if I stayed quiet long enough, behaved well enough, maybe they'd learn to love me. But when the SUV vanished behind the pine trees and left me alone in the Oregon wilderness, something settled in my gut. Some people will never love you, no matter how much you bend. 4 days ago, 12 of us squeezed into 2 vans for a summer trip. They called it a family tradition. I called it 3 days of deliberate erasure. I was the one who bought the groceries, packed the bags, sorted the gear, and still ended up in the back seat beside a busted speaker and someone's suitcase that reeked of gym socks. Smile a bit, Jen. Madison turned from the front seat, casually live streaming. It's family time, supposed to be fun. I pressed my lips together. Any response would be recorded and turned into a snarky caption on her Instagram. Last year she made a reel of me titled, "When You Raise the Stepkid and the Maid in One." It got over 13,000 likes. I wasn't anything special. Just the quiet one carrying plates, doing dishes, disappearing without fuss. When they laughed at childhood stories, I sat silently. I wasn't in those memories. I didn't count as from the beginning. I arrived after my mom married Gary, owner of a small gym chain in the Southwest. It'd been 3 years since I moved back in after getting laid off from the research lab. I said it was temporary. They treated it as permanent. I became the babysitter, the cleaner, the one who made things easier, especially for Madison, my half-sister, who was working on her brand as a minimalist lifestyle influencer. This year's trip was Gary's idea. Nature heals fractured souls, he said while slicing grilled chicken like it was a negotiation. I just nodded. No one asked if I wanted to go. The first 3 days were a copy of every past trip. Madison hogged the front seat for filming. Gary drove like he was escaping a quake. My mom, Eleanor, sat quietly, smiling, eyes never once meeting mine. On the 3rd night, after a dinner of camp stove chili while I was scrubbing pans, Gary asked me to fetch more firewood. There's a pine patch about 15 minutes out. You think you can handle that? I looked up, seeking my mom's eyes. She looked away. Go ahead, Genevieve, she said, voice flat like dishwater. Everyone's tired. I grabbed the flashlight and walked. No arguing, no asking why no one came with me, no reaction when Gary muttered, "Let's see if she can do at least that right." The trail was pitch black. I remember picking up sticks, crunching over damp leaves, flashlight flickering. There were bugs, wind, a strange sense the trees were watching. When I came back, the campsite was empty. No fire, no chairs, no tents, not even a single backpack left behind. The ground was smooth, faint tire tracks heading toward the dirt road. Then I saw the note on the rock next to Madison's bracelet. It wasn't dropped. It was placed. I sank to the ground, arms still full of wood. The sun hadn't fully set, but cold was already crawling up my spine. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Just sat there, remembering 7th grade, locked out of the house for forgetting to fold my blanket, being denied the art team because my mom was too tired to sign the form, Madison tearing my sketchbook, filming it, calling it a lesson for dreamers. I stayed there until it was fully dark, the flashlight dimmed, my jaw ached from shivering. I curled up, hugging my knees, face buried in my elbow. "I'm not going back," I whispered, only the trees heard. "I'm not someone you abandon for sport." I didn't know that was just the beginning. I woke up while the sky was still gray with mist. The ground was cold, pressing into my spine. My jacket was sticky with sap, hair matted, the smell of smoke still faint on my sleeves. A quiet reminder I'd truly been left. No cars, no laughter. Just a lone bird call and the wind threading through branches like mockery. I stood, light-headed from hunger. My ankle throbbed with the first step. But I didn't stop. There was no reason to stay and wait. Who returns when they were the ones who left? The trail sloped downhill, winding through firs and Greystone. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I couldn't stay. By midday, I reached a stretch of asphalt cutting across the woods. No name, no signs. I waited almost 2 hours before an old pickup truck slowed down. "Name's Roy," the man said, silver buzz cut, worn striped shirt. "You all right?" I nodded, then shook my head. My voice cracked. "I need the nearest town." Roy didn't press. He opened the passenger door, turned the radio to soft country, and drove without a word, like I was just another hitchhiker, nothing more. I appreciated the silence. The first town had a gas station, a pie shop, and a post office the size of a phone booth. I used the landline, but didn't call my mom. Or Gary. None of them could help me. I called someone I hadn't dared think about in over a decade. Robin. I still remembered her exhale when she picked up. Dang. My throat tightened. "I'm near Veneta, in Oregon." "Wait right there," she said. "You don't belong to them anymore." Robin lived in a cedar cabin just outside Bend, about 20 minutes from town. She picked me up in her old Jeep, the engine rattling like my heartbeat. The cabin had a slanted roof, cracked windows that breathed with the breeze. Nothing fancy, but no one looked at me like a burden. She didn't ask what happened, just gave me a blanket, a mug of tea, and said, "If the cats snore, just push 'em off. They won't mind." I slept for 2 days straight. When I woke, my body ached, mouth dry as paper. But for the first time in years, I didn't hear medicine's mocking laugh or Gary grumbling, just bird song, a bubbling creek, and the faint smell of baking. The next morning, Robin left a note on the kitchen table. It listed part-time job openings, a watch shop, a co-op market, a wood shop. "No spas," she wrote, "but work heals more than sulking." I picked the organic grocery on the edge of town. Low pay, early shifts, but no one called me a burden. Cynthia, the manager, smiled with her whole face and always remembered my name. "Jen, you've got careful hands," she said, watching me line up honey jars. I smiled back. I met Travis when he came to fix the delivery van. He didn't talk much, just nodded when we crossed paths, amber eyes shining under his ball cap. Every morning he greeted me with a quiet, "Morning, Genevieve." Not "sweetheart" or "hey you," just my name, as if it mattered. At first I thought he was just polite. Then, one sleepy morning, he set a thermos on the counter. "Coffee," he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. "You looked tired." I held the bottle, my hands trembling slightly. Nothing much. Someone once brought me coffee when I needed it. Now it's my turn." It wasn't flirting, it was kindness. I found myself gripping the coffee tumbler tighter than necessary, as if I was holding on to something I hadn't felt in a long time. That night, I opened my old sketchbook again. The first page still had a faint graphite smudge, an unfinished sketch of a man holding a little girl. My dad. I didn't remember his face clearly, but that hand on my shoulder in the drawing, I had never forgotten how it felt. Steady, gentle, real. I sat by the cabin window, watching moonlight stretch across the weathered wood floor. Pen in hand, I started sketching again. This time, I wasn't trying to prove who I was. I just wanted to hold on to what mattered. I didn't know where life here would take me, but at least I wasn't pretending anymore. Everything started to shift, little by little, from that moment on, and then I accidentally found the secrets Robin had never told me. I found the box on a rainy afternoon, climbing up to the attic to help Robin look for the Christmas lights. She had just called, complaining the old strand from last year got chewed through by mice again, and I wanted to help in a tangible, measurable way, not just do dishes and go to bed early. The attic was low-ceilinged, with warped wood and dust clinging to every breath. I pushed some boxes aside, ducked under a broken rocking chair leg, and spotted it. A brown cardboard box, sealed with old silver duct tape, scrawled across the top in black marker, L. Harper. Return to sender. I didn't touch it right away, just crouched next to it, brushing a thin layer of dust from the lid. My throat tightened for a reason I couldn't name. The handwriting was too familiar. Harper, my father's last name. Lawrence Harper. I carried the box downstairs without saying a word. Robin noticed it while filling the kettle. She didn't look surprised. "So you found it," she said simply, her voice light, like she'd been waiting for this day. Inside were letters, over 30, tied neatly with a piece of twine. The envelopes were yellowed, ink smeared here and there, all addressed to me, Genevieve Harper, from someone named Leah Harper. It took me 3 reads of that name to remember. My grandmother, my father's mother, the woman my mother always called unstable, trouble, and not someone fit to be around. I opened the letters one by one. Some were short notes reminding me to eat breakfast before school. Some had childlike doodles or dried wildflowers pressed between sheets. Some were poems, simple handwritten verses that quietly said, "I miss you," without using those exact words. The letter I couldn't put down was near the bottom. It was dated November, the year I turned 9, the year my father died. "My dear one, if my son is no longer there to protect you, then I will. Lawrence set aside a small fund for you, not much, but enough to chase what you love. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are a luxury. If you're reading this, I hope you find it before your mother spends it. Love, Grandma Leah." I sat there for a long time, hollow, like I'd fallen into a space where truth had been buried too long. "She mailed them all to the house, but they were returned," Robin said when I looked up. "She called, wrote, and finally sent them to me when there was no other way. I kept them. I couldn't throw them out." I didn't ask why Robin never gave them to me sooner. Maybe she had asked herself the same thing over the years. All I knew was, for the first time in a long time, I could feel a piece of my story, a piece that had never been acknowledged, starting to take shape. That night, I brought my old sketchbook to the kitchen table and flipped to a near-blank page. The pencil shook slightly in my hand as I began to draw my dad's face. I didn't remember every detail, but I remembered the eyes. Deep brown, a little tired, and the half-smile like he was trying not to laugh. I drew him sitting on a wooden stool, brush in hand, in front of an unfinished canvas. The painting within the painting was still blank, and I imagined it to be a portrait of me. Not yet started, not yet forgotten. Before going to bed, I placed the drawing under my pillow. A quiet whisper to myself, "I'll keep walking the road you didn't get to finish." The next morning, Robin left a simple printout on the kitchen table, a list of 10 regional nonprofits that help adults reclaim financial assets from guardianship abuse. I didn't ask where she got it. I just said, "Where should I start?" She didn't answer right away, just sipped her coffee and said, "By believing you deserve to." I wasn't sure I did, but I knew I would try. And I didn't yet know that the past wasn't done. It was circling back, with more than just old letters. I hadn't even sent anything to the places on Robin's list yet when the past came knocking on its own. It was a June night, close to midnight, when the phone rang. The screen lit up with an unknown number. I sat still in the old kitchen chair, the light still on above the stove, because I was halfway through making toast for the next day. I was going to ignore it. But my thumb brushed accept. "Genevieve," a man's voice, low and tense. "This is Dylan Reeves." I frowned. The name sounded warped from some high school memory. Dim, but not unfamiliar. "I'm Gary's son, from his first marriage," he continued, like he knew I was reaching through the fog. "I know what he did to you. I've got a story too." I said nothing. The night seemed to hold its breath with me. Kicked me out at 17, said I stole. I didn't. No one believed me. Still silence from me. You need to know what he did with your trust fund, Dylan went on. I have documents, proof, if you want to see. I set the phone down on the table, hit record. My voice was flat. Why call now? Because I saw your name in the local paper. That article about you in Bend at the organic grocery store and a photo. I gripped the rim of my water glass. And you think you belong in that story? No, he said softly. I think this might be part of mine, too. The call ended without plans, but 2 days later a package arrived sent from Idaho. The sender was someone I'd never heard of. Evelyn Adams. Maybe Gary's ex-wife, or someone Dylan trusted? Inside was a thick stack of documents in a manila folder, neatly typed, some pages signed. Bank records, wire transfers, and trust management forms for something called the Harper Family Fund, all bearing Gary and my mother's signatures. They had legally drained the fund, starting when I was 16, under the label of minor financial management. The way everything was presented, cold, clinical, it was clear they never thought I'd find out. Or, if I did, I'd never act. That afternoon, I brought the file to Robin. She flipped through each page, eyes narrowing, fingers stiff around the edges. At the final page, she pushed the folder toward me. What do you plan to do? I didn't know. My head was blank, but my chest felt heavy, like all those pages were pressing down on me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage either. There was only one clear feeling. I had been robbed, not of money, but of opportunity, of trust, of time. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the warm yellow glow from the kitchen lights spilling across the floor. On the table was the drawing of my father, painting an unfinished canvas. I looked at the hands in the sketch, his hands, then mine, and wondered if I would have been different if he'd lived. Maybe. But he was gone, and I was still here. The next morning, I splashed my face with water so cold it numbed my skin. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I started listing what needed to be backed up. Documents, scans, legal forms. I wasn't thinking ahead to lawsuits. I just wanted everything preserved, correct, clear, organized. This time, I would be the one writing the story, no longer a character written by others. That evening, Travis saw me sitting by the printer in the auto shop. He didn't ask anything, just set a paper bag on the table beside me. Inside was coffee and a grilled chicken sandwich. When I looked up, he gave a small nod. If you need help, say so, he said, eyes on the window. If not, I'll just sit here for a bit. I nodded. Then, silence. After he left, I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Harper, The Truth. I didn't know where this story would lead, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't back down. Then an email arrived. Not from Dylan. Not from Robin. From someone I never expected to hear from again. The subject line held just 4 words. We need help. It was from my mother, Eleanor Lancaster. No greeting, no check-in. Just a short paragraph, neatly typed, each sentence clipped, like old dialogue from a play no one wanted to perform again. Madison is in trouble. She's being sued for false advertising on TikTok. Gary, too. Things aren't going well. He lost most of his investment in a crypto project. Our family needs help. After all, we're still blood. I stared at the screen, unmoved. The only emotion rising was a cold stillness. Like standing in a snowstorm, knowing you can't offer anything and no longer want to. I didn't reply. I closed the browser tab and stepped outside, the evening wind through the pines tangling my hair. But it felt good. I wasn't the person they needed. I was just a credit card that hadn't expired yet. That night, I reopened the old box of letters from Grandma Leia. There was one I'd missed, folded at the bottom. She had written it in purple ink, her handwriting crooked but careful. If you're reading this, it means you still have a path back to what is yours. Lawrence left a small fund for you, separate from your mother's control, but to access it, you need to know who to ask. Below that was a name, an email address, and an old phone number written in pen. Margot Eisen, my father's former financial advisor. The next morning, I gave it a try. I wasn't expecting much. On the other end, after several rings and the whir of a fax machine, a woman's voice picked up. Firm, older. "Mrs. Margot," she said. "Who's calling?" I gave my name slowly. At the mention of my father, she paused for a moment. "Genevieve Harper." "I thought you'd been out of contact for years." I gave a brief version of the story, about Robin, about the letters, about being abandoned in the woods, about the trust. Not in anger, just the truth, as it was. She said, "You do have a custodial account at Valley Trust, established when you were 9. Not a large amount, but it's real and untouched." I bit down on my thumbnail at that. Untouched. Which meant at least one part of my dream hadn't been stolen. 3 days later, confirmation papers arrived by mail. That small fund, about $30,000, had sat undisturbed in an account for over 20 years. It wouldn't make me rich, but it was enough to begin something that belonged to no one but me. I printed everything, clipped it into a separate folder, and placed it in the drawer next to my bed. Not to use right away, just to know it was there, like a key. That night, while I was in the little studio out back, hands stained with charcoal dust, Travis showed up with a rolled-up sheet of paper. "What's that?" I asked, watching him pull it from a canvas tote. "Sketch plans to renovate the shed," he said. "I figured if you're really going to draw, you deserve decent lighting and a west-facing window." I didn't say anything, just sat there, holding the draft with both hands. The paper was still warm, the pencil lines deliberate. "You don't need to change anything," I whispered. He scratched his head. "Well, not everyone needs much to get started. Just a space to exist." I nodded. A space to exist. It sounded simple, but it had taken me years to earn that feeling. That night, I lay on the single bed near the window, moonlight filtering through the white curtain. I wasn't thinking about Madison or Mom or Gary. I thought about the man in the sketch, my father, and imagined him sitting beside me, watching me sign my name at the corner of a new drawing. Almost 20 years to write it without trembling. I thought everything was settling until a face from the past appeared on my doorstep. I was wiping down the table in the workshop when I heard a car pull up by the gate. It wasn't Travis's engine. His always rattled like it was trying to preserve dignity. This one was quieter, precise. When I stepped out, the late sunlight cast a golden blur across the dirt path. A silver sedan parked just beyond the fence. The woman who stepped out made my hand clench, the rag still dusted with graphite. Madison. Wavy hair, designer sunglasses pushed to her head, cream blazer buttoned once, short skirt showing off sun-bronzed knees. She walked like the road belonged to her. "Genevieve," she smiled, like we were meeting at a coffee shop. Not after she left me in the woods and emailed asking for money. I stood still on the porch. "How did you know I was here?" "Internet," Madison shrugged, removing her sunglasses. "A few local articles, some info from someone in town. Wasn't hard." "What do you want?" "Say, that?" She glanced into the workshop, then back at me. "It's not really something I could explain over email." I folded my arms. "You have 1 minute." Madison pressed her lips together. She wasn't used to limits. "Gary is under investigation for tax stuff and for how he handled the family fund investments. Mom, she's not doing well. Drinking a lot, saying weird things. And you're facing a lawsuit for crypto fraud," I cut in. Her face twitched. "I just promoted it. I didn't take the money. That was my job. A job that left 18 people with nothing." She didn't answer right away. The wind caught her blazer. She tugged it down, her hands slightly shaking. "I messed up," Madison whispered. "But I wasn't malicious. Things spun out of control." I stepped off the porch, standing in front of her. 3 of those victims were high school students. She went quiet, eyes drifting elsewhere. I saw something flicker behind her gaze. Not quite guilt, maybe just the recognition that she had no way out. We need you to sign something, she said. Just confirming you've received your inheritance. That. There's no dispute. They said if you do, the case gets easier. You wouldn't need to give us any money. Just one page. I laughed, short and dry. You want me to sign off saying I was treated fairly? For Mom, she murmured. She can't take much more. I clenched my hands together, fingertips cold, like they were brushing damp snow. What did my mom say when I was left in the woods? Remember? Madison didn't respond. One call, not a single apology. I stepped back, eyes fixed on her. Leave my land, Madison, she swallowed. I know I'm not a good person, but I didn't think you'd be this cold. It's not cold, I said. It's clarity. If you've ever been silenced because no one believed you, or blamed for simply speaking the truth, leave a comment. Share this story if you think someone out there needs to hear it. When the sedan pulled away, kicking up a trail of soft dust, I stood for a moment before heading back in. Travis was wiping his hands at the far end of the workshop, watching me like he wanted to ask something but decided not to. You okay? Was all he said. I nodded. It's fine if you don't want to talk, he added, setting down the rag. But I'm here. I stepped closer, leaning gently on the drawing table, looking up at the window where sunlight had started slipping off the wooden edge. Part of me still wants to forgive, I whispered. But the rest doesn't want to be someone people think they can manipulate anymore. Then you're learning how to hold a boundary, he said, not how to be cold. That night, I sat alone in the studio. I pulled out the folder, took out the acid confirmation paper, the one Madison wanted me to sign. I laid it on the table, pen in hand, almost instinctively ready to sign, then paused. I tore it in half. What I didn't expect was that a few days later, I'd be sitting across from them. Not on my land, but in a place they chose. I picked a small diner in Boise, 3 hours' drive from Bend, wedged between an old gas station and a bakery that's changed names 3 times. No one in town cared who sat with who, and the staff always kept your coffee topped off without asking questions. Robin came with me, sitting 2 tables away with a worn paperback. She knew I didn't need escorting. Just someone so I wouldn't have to drive back alone. When I walked in, Gary was already seated, arms crossed, crisp white shirt ironed to perfection. My mom, Eleanor, stood too quickly, hugging me like cameras were pointed her way. I kept my hands loose by my sides. Didn't hug back. Madison sat at the end of the booth, tapping her nails on a water glass. She looked tired, not physically, more like the worn-down fatigue of someone trying to believe things were still under control. We don't have much time, Gary started, straight to business like always. Madison needs to clear her record. You could help with that. Just a statement. It'd ease things for everyone. I pulled out the chair, dropped my document bag beside me, and kept a hand on the strap, like a shield. Eleanor lowered her gaze. I know you're angry, but you're the only one who can turn this around. I looked straight at her. I'm not angry. I remember. Come on, Madison said, trying to sound composed. It's just old stuff. Everyone's messed up before. It's not old stuff when you leave someone in the woods and live stream it, I said, voice steady. No one's obligated to be kind to people who treated them like a prop. Gary leaned in, arms crossed. I get that you're hurt, but this affects the whole family now. I studied him closely. You once called me a burden. You signed off on taking funds from my father's trust before I was of age, and now you're asking me to help the family? No one replied. Madison chose to be the face of a scam, I continued. I owe her no silence. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to drain the sound from the booth, like a train station holding its breath. Gary frowned. So this is your move, revenge? I shook my head. No, this is a boundary. The air felt dense, like someone was holding the room's breath. Then suddenly the back door of the diner swung open and a woman's voice rang out. It's not revenge, it's truth. I turned around. Kendra, an old friend from high school, stood there holding a folder of documents. She nodded at me, then looked straight at Gary. Madison isn't innocent, Kendra said loud enough for everyone to hear. She signed the promotional documents for that cryptocurrency with him, and he promised to help clean up the mess if things went south. Where did you get that? Madison stammered. An old client of Gary's who was threatened if they spoke out. Now he's filed an independent lawsuit, Kendra replied. Eleanor sank into her chair like she'd lost her balance. Madison stared at me, lips pressed tight. Gary, though his face stayed calm, I saw his hands gripping his glass so hard his knuckles went white. I pulled a small envelope from my bag and gently placed it on the table. This is a copy of the bus receipt from 5 years ago. From the forest where you left me to Ogden, Utah. $18.75. That's what you left me worth. I stood up, saying nothing more. Outside, the rain started falling softly. Robin had slipped away from the table earlier, waiting by the car with her coat ready in hand. You okay? She asked. I nodded, neither smiling nor looking away. You look like you just untied a big knot, she said, opening the car door. The drive back to Bend was quiet. I didn't need to explain to Robin, and she didn't ask. When we got back, I opened the studio door, turned on the light, and saw my father's unfinished drawing on the table. I sat down. My hands didn't shake for the first time. I started finishing what was missing. 3 days after the Boise meeting, I got a call from an unknown Midwest area code. I was organizing my paint palette in the studio when the phone rang. Instinct told me to let it go to voicemail, but my hand still answered. Genevieve Harper? A clear, calm female voice. Yeah. I'm Margot Eisen. I used to work with your father. I set down my brush. I remember your name. You might want to come to Minneapolis. I have some documents Lawrence left for you. He didn't get a chance to officially transfer them, but he wanted you to have them. I lean on the table. What kind of documents? We should meet. I flew to Minneapolis on a Friday afternoon, a cold breeze sweeping in late April, though the calendar said spring. Robin lent me an old leather bag to carry the files. Travis saw me off at the door. Didn't ask much, just slipped a homemade granola bar and a folded note into my bag. You can come back any time. Margot's office was on the 5th floor of a historic building near the old train station. The elevator moved slowly, like chewing over memories. When I entered, she stood up from her desk, tall and thin, silver hair pulled back, plum-colored cardigan with wrinkled cuffs. You look like him, she said, motioning for me to sit. She handed me a small wooden box, light but solid. Inside were legal papers, a short handwritten letter, and a thick envelope with photos. I opened the letter first. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, but I still want you to have control over what I tried to keep for you. The house by Lake Superior, where you painted your first picture, is held in your name through an independent trust. Your mother doesn't know. Gary doesn't know. Robin might suspect, but I asked her to keep it quiet until you were strong enough to return. I paused, not from emotion, but from a quiet feeling deeper than tears, trust, without needing proof. Margot continued, the house isn't big, but it's intact. Property taxes are paid through this year. You can go there whenever you want. I flipped through the photos in the envelope. A small, grassy yard by the lake, a faded white picket fence, a once peeling wall now covered in green moss. Have you been there before? Margot asked. I remember painting there, but not much else, I said, and said, with just the colors and the light, you'll remember. I flew back to Bend with a Google Maps printout marking Greystone Lake House. When I told Robin everything, she wasn't surprised. She just smiled softly and said, your dad always had a plan. I spent the next week organizing paperwork, moving some of my small fund toward fixing up the house. Travis offered to help, without saying if it was for technical reasons or for me. Probably both. One evening, while reviewing roof repair and electrical plans, I got an email. No clear sender address, just a name. Eleanor Lancaster. Subject: no excuses, just a request. The message was brief. Your sister, no matter what she's done, didn't deserve to be abandoned like that. If you can't forgive me, I understand, but if you still have any love for family, please come. I'm sick, not much time left. I don't need money, I just want to see my daughter one more time. I stared at the screen for a long time, not out of doubt, but because every word echoed something I once wanted to hear but no longer believed. I didn't reply. I shut the computer, stepped onto the porch, and sat on the wooden step outside the studio. The wind was cold but peaceful. I thought about Madison, who hadn't sent anything since Boise. I thought about Gary, probably worried about himself. But when I closed my eyes, I thought about my dad, the man who left a house by the lake so I'd have a place where no one asked, "What have you contributed?" And then, one early morning, I drove out of Bend alone, heading northeast, to where I was once a kid, hands stained with paint, hair dusted by sunshine. I didn't know what I'd find in that house, but I was sure. Something was waiting for me, something never named. The road to Greystone Lake was narrower and more winding than I remembered. Pines thick on both sides, sunlight filtering through the canopy, casting slanted streaks on the asphalt. I drove slowly, partly because everything felt unfamiliar, partly because of something in my chest. Not quite excitement, but not calm either. The house appeared around a bend, standing silent as if it had been waiting for me since the day I vanished from my own life. Gray shingles faded by time, a warped wooden porch, windows coated in a thin layer of dust. But it was still whole. I parked, stepped out, and took a deep breath. The air here was different, colder, but clean, like all the quiet moments waiting to be called by name were still resting. I slid the key into the lock. The door creaked softly open. Inside still smelled of old paint, paper, and dry pine. On the opposite wall was the chalk drawing I made when I was 8, a bright orange fox running through the trees. Dad said it looked like a flame that could run. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall. My hand brushed gently over the chipped paint on the wooden floor. No miracles happened, just the feeling that I wasn't being pushed away here. I wasn't a guest. 3 weeks later, I moved in permanently to Greystone Lake. Every morning, I woke early, opened the window facing the lake, brewed coffee, then sat at the small wooden table on the porch to draw. Some days, just sketches of tall grasses swaying. Other days, portraits from memory. I called those pieces my unfinished parts. Robin came by the first weekend, bringing apple pie and a pot of mint. "Let this place breathe with you," she said. Then she wandered through the house, touching every corner as if measuring if it was wide enough for peace. Travis showed up 2 weeks later. He stood on the porch holding a bag of tools and a fresh paint can. "I'm not great with feelings," he said, "but these door handles need fixing." I just nodded. He didn't need to say more. We painted the porch roof, changed locks, set up a new easel stand. Some afternoons we sat silently for hours, just listening to the water lap the shore. One early summer afternoon, I received a package with no return address. Brown paper, slanted handwriting clear as day. To Genevieve Harper, Greystone Lake House. Inside was a familiar cream-colored sketchbook, the one I thought Madison had torn apart when I was 15. The cover was carefully taped, each page laminated for moisture protection. On page 32 was an unfinished sketch of my father, pencil lines incomplete but intact. Along with it was a handwritten note. "No apology is enough, but maybe this should return to the one who made it." No signature. I didn't need to know who sent it. What mattered was that it came back. I closed the studio door, carried the sketchbook into the bedroom, and placed it neatly on the bookshelf. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no waking from the echoes of the past. The next month, I officially launched the Harper Boundaries Fund, a small grant supporting girls who have experienced financial and emotional abuse in their families. We don't call them victims. We call them those in transition. The launch was held in the small town hall where free weekend art classes still took place. I wore a moss green linen dress and stood before 30 strangers reading a short passage. We didn't build this fund to accuse, but to clear a path. Not to run away, but to choose direction. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is redraw the map. The last line made an older woman in the front row nod softly. The girl beside her gripped the chair arm, eyes fixed on me, as if hearing her own story in another voice. That evening, I returned to the lake house, kitchen light casting a warm glow on old tile. I hung the portrait of my father on the wall, the drawing I'd finished after returning from Boise. His hand held a brush, but this time it wasn't pointed at the unfinished canvas. It rested lightly on my shoulder. I looked at it for a long time, and just when I thought it was over, the phone rang again. The screen showed a name I no longer had saved, but I recognized immediately through my whole body. 3 simple words, cold and precise. Eleanor is gone. I sat on the wooden step outside the porch, the afternoon sunlight filtering softly through pine branches, still holding the phone with the screen off. The message stayed there, plain and unadorned. Eleanor is gone. No other details. No, she passed at what time. No, please come to the funeral. Just those 3 words. Sharp reminders that even after I left that story behind, old scars can still tighten when the wind shifts. Robin sat beside me quietly. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just handed me a cup of mint tea, her hand resting gently on my back like the touch of earth when you rise after a fall. "Are you going?" she asked. I looked out at the lake, water sparkling in early summer light. "I don't know," I answered, not because I'm angry, just not sure what role I still have there. I didn't go to the funeral. Instead, I wrote a letter and sent it by email. In the letter, I didn't blame anyone, nor did I praise. I just recorded a few things that, if she could read them, might explain why I chose a different way to live. I told her about Greystone, about finishing the portrait of my dad, about the fund I started for girls like me, those who had been forced silent to keep the peace. I said thank you for giving me life, and closed the letter with one line. I hold no anger. But I need peace more than an apology. Madison didn't respond. No one from the old family asked any questions either. It seemed they understood this was the last time my name would be on their contact list. And I felt lighter. One afternoon in mid-June, I held an outdoor painting session in the backyard. A few young girls from town came. Some had sought advice from my fund, others were just friends of friends. We sat under the large oak tree, painting to soft jazz music. Travis set up a rough wooden frame for me to hang sketches. A girl about 8 stood beside me, looking at the drawing of my father, and asked, "Who is that?" I answered, "He was the one who taught me to see what others don't." She nodded, then turned back to her watercolor box and painted a tree with long hair. As night fell, I lit a small campfire beside the porch. People gathered around. Some brought guitars, others marshmallows. We didn't share big stories, just fragments about long days, cars needing repairs, soup with too much salt, and a love letter sent to the wrong person. Amid the laughter and smell of burning wood, I looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. Something inside me softened, like a cut healing into new skin. Not fully healed, but no longer aching. A week later, I received a package from the court, a copy of the financial investigation conclusion on Gary. It stated fraud, misuse of trust assets, and being barred from managing any fund related to minors for 10 years. I didn't celebrate. I just printed the report, slipped it into a thin folder, and placed it neatly in the drawer under my drawing table, where I kept things that once broke me, but now formed the foundation of what I'm building. I took a walk around the house before full darkness. The mint garden had grown tall, some branches spilling onto the stone walkway. I picked a few stems and placed them in a ceramic vase on the dining table. Travis was checking the water tank outside. When he saw me, he waved and pointed to a small wooden box. "Delivered this afternoon," he said. No return address. I opened it. Inside was an old, folded piece of paper, thin but familiar handwriting. You're not the leftover, you just don't fit where they want you placed, but you're still a part. No signature. I folded it carefully, not to keep as evidence, but like a small stone laid down in a riverbed, so the water could keep flowing clear. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe in your car, before bed, or a day when you need a story to remind you to stand up. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you want to hear more honest journeys like this, don't forget to follow the channel because the next story might be exactly what you need. Genevieve's story isn't just about leaving a toxic family. It's about rebuilding herself with clarity, resilience, and kindness toward herself. She doesn't seek revenge through anger, but through living a full, purposeful life. In reality, many still struggle between pain and duty. Genevieve reminds us that love isn't a debt to be paid, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is take the steps to become your true self.